Tonight, Ontario's education workers are prepared to strike if negotiations with the province break down.
We are willing to strike for a contract that is good for students, for families, and for workers.
A nearly 50% increase is not reasonable. It's not affordable.
Talks will continue this week, but school support staff have voted overwhelmingly in favor of a strike if a contract agreement cannot be reached. Plus,
the work itself is not unsafe. It's the law that makes the work unsafe.
Sex workers take their fight to the Superior Court in Toronto, challenging current laws that they say continue to put them at risk instead of giving them protection. And
we now need to be looking to our capacity in primary care.
In its final report, Ontario's science table says the weight of COVID care is now shifting to family doctors, warning that the province needs to come up with an approach to ensure more people have access. Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. Ontario's education workers have voted overwhelmingly in favor of a strike should talks break down with the provincial government. Now, the union representing the education workers say many can no longer afford to live on their income. And it's hoping the vote will put pressure on the province when contract negotiations continue later this week. Patrick Swadden has the latest.
It's time for a meaningful wage increase for us, the lowest paid education workers.
Laura Walton says the $39,000 average yearly salary earned by education workers in Ontario isn't enough. After a 10-day voting period, her union, representing 55,000 of those workers, made its intentions abundantly clear today.
An overwhelming 96.5% have voted yes for a strong strike mandate.
The union represents workers such as early childhood educators, custodians, librarians, and school administration staff. They want a wage increase of $3.25 an hour for education workers across the board.
They need to be able to pay their bills. 1/4 of our membership are accessing food bank services. They are working 2 and 3 jobs.
Others in the union say better wages would bring needed workers to the profession.
There needs to be more of us, a lot more of us. My work seems to be putting out one fire after another.
The government has offered a raise of 2% a year for workers making less than $40,000 and a 1.25% bump for all other workers. Education Minister Stephen Lecce says the union's demands are unreasonable.
When you're asking or demanding nearly 50% in compensation hikes, I would argue by any measurement that is unreasonable. We pay them well relative to what other individuals doing the exact same job do in virtually every setting. From colleges to hospitals during the pandemic, they still make more per hour and on an annualized basis.
Both the union and education minister agree they don't want kids to be out of school. Lecce did not rule out legislation that would make schools an essential service in order to make that happen. Meanwhile, Walton says the union isn't going to cave to government pressure.
We can't afford not to fight any longer. If we don't fight back now, when do we fight back?
A strike isn't certain at this point. The union will continue negotiating with the government this Thursday and Friday. If a deal isn't reached by later in the month, the union can put in motion steps needed for strike action. A bridge they say they're willing to cross if needed. Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Toronto.
Canadian sex workers are taking their fight to the Superior Court, hoping it is the first step to decriminalizing sex work. A coalition of sex workers and sex worker-led groups are presenting arguments at a 5-day Superior Court hearing here in Toronto that begun today. As Ali Chiasson reports, they say current laws continue to exploit them and put them in harm's way instead of offering protection.
The work itself is not unsafe. It's the law that makes the work unsafe.
In 2014, the Conservative government introduced the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. It meant sex workers would be immune to prosecution for working in the sex trade. However, the law bans them from communicating in public to sell sex and criminalizes the clients who pay for sex. At the time, the government said the law would protect people, when those in the industry say it's actually made the work a lot more dangerous in a lot of ways.
To negotiate condom use with a client, to negotiate what actual acts, sexual acts are going to occur during an appointment, because in order to do so, you have to communicate about sexual services, and that's a crime.
And since it's a crime, how can a sex worker feel safe going to the police if a client turns violent? Monica Forrester says this creates a landscape for predators to thrive.
We're still seeing high levels of violence, murder. When police actually go to action or do anything, it's when someone is dead.
The Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform is at the Superior Court this week, fighting for the government to strike down the current laws in place, taking a vital step forward toward decriminalization.
They could remove sex work from the criminal code and start to think about other mechanisms beyond the criminal code that could actually help to protect sex workers. They could also rely on laws of general application to actually address violence that sex workers are experiencing, because the sex work laws don't protect sex workers from that violence that they're experiencing.
The Attorney General's side is arguing the laws should stay in place because it gives police the power to intervene and investigate possible sex trafficking, while sex workers themselves don't have to fear prosecution for the act.
So sex workers are taking the government to court to fight for their rights.
Is it unfair that the burden is on the sex workers themselves to advocate for their own safety?
Yes, it is. 112%. Their search for liberation should have been respected a long time ago.
The landmark court hearing continues throughout the week. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Durham Regional Police releasing new details today about a murder victim whose body was found in a hockey bag last May. Investigators say they now believe Ariel Kaplan was abducted in North Toronto before he was killed, and his body later dumped in a pond in Uxbridge. Greg Ross has the latest.
We now believe Mr. Kaplan was abducted from the area of Yonge Street and Shepherd Avenue in Toronto on August 29, 2021.
Police say that is the last time Ariel Kaplan was seen alive. They say they've been able to track his movements that night using cell phone data and information provided by more than 125 witnesses.
Investigators also believe that on the night of his disappearance, Mr. Kaplan had dinner with several acquaintances at a restaurant in the Yorkville area.
While cell phone data shows that Kaplan was here in the Yorkville area that night after 9 p.m., police can't say specifically which restaurant he attended or who he was with.
We also would like to hear from anyone who was present at the dinner with him on August 29, 2021, or any employees of restaurants in the Yorkville area that remember Mr. Kaplan at their establishment last year.
According to witnesses, Kaplan knew he was in danger.
Mr. Kaplan appeared to fear for his safety in the days and weeks that preceded his abduction.
Some witnesses have suggested Kaplan had dealings with organized crime and have told police that it may be tied to his death. Police say Kaplan had previously been involved with fraudulent activity and was facing charges in relation to a stolen tractor-trailer in Brampton.
There's no direct evidence that he was linked to organized crime or that organized crime is involved in this. However, we're open to all avenues.
Police say the hockey bag that Kaplan's body was found in was seen by a witness as early as November of 2021, but wasn't recovered until May of this year. At this point, they have not revealed the cause of death.
Obviously, we're not going to release that information at this point. We're going to use that, obviously, to verify some of the veracity of some of our witnesses.
Police are asking anyone who may have information to come forward. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's go to Dahlia Ashry now with a first look at your forecast. And Dahlia, a nice sunny day and temperatures pretty much spot on for this time of year.
That's right, Kelda. I mean, we are at those seasonal temperatures right where we're supposed to be. However, there is some frosty conditions for some parts of the region, and that would be mostly the southern part of Ontario, but mainly clear skies and sunny conditions throughout the week, or most of the week. The daytime high in Toronto today, 15 degrees, a little cooler out in Barrie, 14 degrees. And if we take a closer look, there is that frost advisory that is in effect for most of the region for southern Ontario near London, and then also Oshawa, Hamilton, and other parts of the area. If we look a little closer near Clarington and Caledon and Hamilton, like I said. Now, there is that high pressure system that is moving across the province, and that's what's giving us those clear skies and those sunny conditions as well. So we won't really be seeing rain tomorrow, but maybe we will be seeing it over the next few days. We'll have more on that later. Kelda?
All right, thanks so much, Dahlia. The Ontario government announcing funding today for projects that prevent online hate crime, human trafficking, and fraud.
Today, our government is announcing an investment of $1.6 million in 18 community projects across the province to combat cyber crimes and keep Ontario safe.
Today's announcement taking place at the Jane Finch Community and Family Center, which is one of the organizations that will be receiving funding. The center runs a program called Sisters Keeper. It works with young Black and racialized women in the Jane and Finch community to develop a youth-led prevention and awareness strategy to combat sex and human trafficking. Ontario's COVID-19 science table has released its final brief, and it is sounding the alarm over the province's shortage of family doctors. It says Ontario needs to put an urgent focus on ensuring people have access to primary care, because it's these community-based doctors that will be the ones dealing with COVID care in the years ahead. Lorenda Redekop has more.
The research cites numbers, finding most little ones have a family doctor or access to primary care. But it found that 1.8 million Ontarians don't have a family doctor, with new immigrants and people in low-income neighborhoods most affected. And that number is likely an underestimate from right before the pandemic.
The number of family doctors who stopped work really skyrocketed in the first 6 months of the pandemic.
Plus, the science table finds at least 1.7 million Ontarians could lose their family doctor to retirement by 2025. This is part of the now disbanded science table's final report, 3 separate briefs, all on primary care.
While we spent a lot of time early in the pandemic counting hospital beds and ventilators, we now need to be looking to our capacity in primary care.
The briefs point out it's the main place COVID and long COVID will be dealt with going forward. They point to the importance of family health teams, doctors along with others, such as nurses, pharmacists, and social workers working together. Dr. Tara Kieran is part of one and says it helped with her COVID patients who were sick at home.
I had a nurse who was able to actually call them and follow up, provide them with an oxygen monitor, and then who would just only check in with me if there was something really, up that they needed my advice around.
The report shows those teams are not common in Canada overall, and even less so in Ontario for people with chronic conditions. But the researchers say COVID showed people who had access to them received better care during the pandemic, and that they're part of a solution.
We're going to have to get creative. Teams can be virtual, they can be networked across a neighborhood or a region, but they need to work together to serve the same population. They need to be able to communicate.
In a statement, the Ministry of Health says it's added over 1,800 family doctors since the PCs took office, that they're looking at allowing doctors from other parts of the country to practice here and better using foreign-trained physicians. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
If you were near Union Station today, you may have noticed a group of women dressed mostly in pink marching to raise awareness about breast cancer.
I'm so proud to be a part of this. My mom is a breast cancer survivor herself, so I put my heart and soul in this, and we're really excited to kick off October Breast Cancer Awareness Month with these street teams from coast to coast.
Kicking off the month in a bright way, 8 women walking arm in arm, 7 of them wearing pink and 1 in black, highlighting that 1 in 8 women in Canada will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. Organizers hoping to remind people to stay on top of their breast health. Welcome back. A CBC Toronto investigation is shedding light on a dramatic increase in car thefts here in our city. Police data shows more than 6,000 people in Toronto have had their vehicles stolen so far this year. And that's a rise of almost 50%. Farmer Ali looks into why thefts are up and what police and community groups are doing to stop them.
So many cars are being stolen, including Patricia Lee's. Security footage shows 3 people trying to steal her Lexus SUV from her Toronto driveway in July. One person tries the door handle. 2 others cover the headlights. Shortly after, an alarm goes off and they run away. Just months earlier, surveillance footage from a neighbor captured her other vehicle stolen from the same place.
It's really scary because they were so close. I mean, they're in my house, in the property.
Toronto is facing a massive spike in car thefts this year. As of September 26, there have been nearly 6,500 auto thefts. When compared with all of 2021, which saw about 4,500 reports, that's a nearly 45% increase. And this year isn't even over.
It is staggering. It's a very, very large number.
Toronto police have launched a new organized crime investigation team. It's now tasked in part with tackling this problem. A big reason for the increase, it says, pandemic supply problems that made new cars harder to get have eased.
The manufacturers now, I believe, are delivering vehicles that, from what I understand, hundreds and hundreds of orders had come in and were unable to be delivered. So it's simply a case of a higher supply.
Investigators believe most thefts are targeted by organized groups.
The biggest profit is really to export them outside of the country. So we have a real problem, and it's a problem that's organized. So that's where we have to come in.
That's where the car was parked.
And it's not just luxury cars that are being targeted. This Toronto woman's Honda CR-V was stolen 10 days ago.
A police officer came to the house later that day and informed us that we were one of 6 CR-Vs that were taken within the last 2 days.
Brian Gass' organization tracks car theft data, a crime he says doesn't just affect victims, but other drivers too.
And it affects all Canadians, it affects premiums.
After a spike in thefts from their neighborhoods, some community groups took matters into their own hands.
We do the Neighborhood Watch program, and that was all part of it, is to try and communicate prevention techniques. But there's just only so much people can do, and that's really the problem.
As for Lee, she says she no longer feels safe driving her Lexus in Toronto.
It has scared me so much that I don't want to keep the car anymore.
She plans to take this car back to the dealership. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
When it first opened in 2012, the Pam McConnell Aquatic Centre in Regent Park was so popular that even those outside the community flocked to it in droves. Well, now residents say they're frustrated after being unable to use a number of amenities at the facility, and that it's reflective of a larger issue municipalities are facing. Meg Roberts has more.
Sunday afternoon, Stefan Schmelzer's kids went to Regent Park Pool to do what he calls the cool things. But the Leslieville resident says he was frustrated to find out none of those things were operational.
The slide, the rope, the diving board, the big, huge warm pool with the fountains and everything, they're all unusable. So it was kind of a bummer. We made the most of it, but it wasn't what we thought.
According to the City of Toronto's website, the diving board, spa, slide, swing rope, and leisure pool, all not available. Schmelzer tweeted out this picture Sunday. Hundreds of people have since liked the post. It's alarming for Schmelzer, who says he's been using the facility with his kids since it opened in 2016. The building is less than a decade old.
If you're building these things and then all the things that make them unique and beautiful just fall to pieces, it's kind of sad. It makes it sad for everybody.
The city lacks the resources to do the basic things that we need to do.
A longtime City of Toronto councillor says he gets similar complaints to his office, whether it be for the state of housing, garbage cans, or potholes on the street. He said managers are cutting corners to save money as budget committees underfund various departments.
The city really needs to look at its books, and it needs to look at revenue sources. Gone are the days when property taxes alone can fund the services that we need. You spend all this money building it, something breaks down, as happens in every sector of life, and then you don't have the money to fix it. That's not a good proposition.
The City of Toronto says it's taking steps to restore the amenities as quickly as possible. The water slide reopened today. However, it is looking at ways to quickly fix or replace the spa pool, diving board, and the rope. It says delays are related to material sourcing. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
And you are looking at a live shot of the Toronto skyline, mainly clear this evening with some cloudy periods overnight. Currently, it is 9 degrees here in the city. Let's go back to Dahlia now with a look at your long-range forecast. And Dahlia, glad to hear there will be more sunshine, at least for the next couple of days.
That's right, Kelda. I mean, mainly sunny skies and dry days ahead. You won't need your umbrella until maybe Thursday, which we'll get to in a bit. But first, let's see how it was earlier today. The daytime highs was 15 degrees, a little cooler out in Barrie, 13 degrees, and a little warmer in Kitchener and London. But that's not to say those conditions will be the same overnight tonight with the frost advisory that we were talking about earlier. So if we take a closer look, speaking of which, that frost advisory is in effect for most parts of southern Ontario and some parts of the northern part of Ontario. But for the most part, if we take a look here in Hamilton, Kitchener, and even near London, we're going to see that frost advisory. So just keep an eye on your plants because it could be quite damaging for any crop or plants that you have out there. The high pressure system, like we were talking about, it is moving across the province. That's what gives us the clear skies and those dry conditions. And speaking of dry conditions, that's what we're going to see tonight. And in Oshawa, 1 degree. So that means that there is a frost advisory there. So anywhere that we see really one, it's nearing that sub-zero temperature. So Markham and Hamilton, same thing. Toronto, we're still not quite there. Not to say that we won't, but that that Arctic temperatures that is moving in some parts of the province, that's when we get those cooler temperatures, which hasn't quite hit Toronto quite yet. Tomorrow, sunny skies, 19 degrees. Wednesday, a mix of sun and cloud, 21 though. So now we're hitting those 20s, which we haven't seen those temperatures in quite a while. But Thursday and Friday, there is a 60% chance of rain on Thursday and a little bit of rain as well that can be expected for Friday. As we head into the long weekend, though, we're going to see those sunny conditions, and next week should be looking great too. But just talking about this week, mostly dry skies except for Thursday and Friday, and double-digit evening on Wednesday night. Kelda?
Thanks so much. A Bhangra dancer from the Yukon brought the popular Indian dance to the CN Tower today.
North America's highest Bhangra dance, like on CN Tower at this elevation, and Bhangra is also known as happy dance, and we are creating joy, hope, and positivity and happiness.
Participants of all ages joined in the energetic dancing led by viral sensation Gurdeep Pander early this morning. And it's all for a good cause as well. The event helping to raise money for the United Way GTA. Bhangra is a traditional Punjabi dance. Pander says his goal is to spread joy and happiness across the country. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Dwight Drummond has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night.